Good evening, folks, and welcome to another edition of An Hour with Bob. Here we are, March 1st. How did you enjoy your leap year day? The 29th of February was yesterday. What'd you do for leap year? Tonight, I got my good friend back. I mean, over the years, I was talking about it today, I was talking about it yesterday, I was thinking about it last week. Of all my guests over the years, this guy is one of my favorite guests. I'm not saying it because he's here tonight. I'm saying it because it's a fact. In 24 years, May 29th, it'll be 24 years I've been doing this show. And I started this show, and it was as a result of the first show being with the Rhode Island National Guard. And it was because of my dealing with the Rhode Island National Guard, I met this man, Lieutenant-General Reggie Centracchio, my good friend, and here he is. He's there. He's right here now. He's there. How you doing?
I'm still here.
You're still here.
24 years later.
Now what do you call it? How do you say that?
Emeritus.
Emeritus?
Yeah, which means
that's a
forever.
Latin. Huh? It means forever?
Yeah.
Oh, I never knew that.
As long as you're on the face of the earth, I guess.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean an awful lot other than the title.
Other than the title,
recognize that you were the Adjutant-General at one point, but they give you and bestow upon you the
It's like the gold watch or something, right?
Yeah,
it's like
something like that.
Yeah,
but,
not a fake gold watch.
It's just a title.
Just
no
a title?
money goes with it.
Well, I got to tell you, though, it's a different National Guard without you there.
Well, I don't know about
For me,
that.
it is, anyway.
It's a different time and certainly different challenges that I didn't have. But during my tour, I had challenges that my
Yeah, you had some
predecessors
challenges.
didn't have, so
Yeah, you had...
everything changes for the better.
Right. I mean, you had the Iraq... two of the Iraq things started. Were there when you were the Adjutant General.
Well, it started way back with the Bosnia scenario.
Right, that's
And
right.
then
That's
it went
right.
to
That
the,
we were had a little to do
just
it.
before I came in, it was the Gulf War, and then
Right.
then Hungary after that, and then we went into Iraq and Afghanistan and several other places around the world. Most of the places you went with me.
Yeah,
on
that was
occasion.
fun.
Yeah, it was.
That was fun. It was
Cuba-
it was educational.
And Cuba was one of the highlights.
The
of my
highlights.
tour.
Yes, yes. I mean, everything.
Not as good as Hungary though.
No?
I mean that was.
You think Hungary was the best?
Yeah. I mean you captured the entire world.
Now, what do you mean by that?
Well, you came close to establishing the brink of an international incident by placing your stickers on Russian MiGs.
That was funny, though. Really, that was funny.
Yeah, it was.
That
good.
was funny.
But it was good. It was good stuff.
And what was really good about that, after we left, I left them. I used to have these round stickers, An Hour with Bob and Bob's Big Adventure stickers. And not only did we put them on everything, I didn't put it on.
No, I know you. Before you even say it, I'm going to say it. You put it on the dog.
I did not put it on the dog. I did not. I would never do that. I didn't hurt the dog.
No, you didn't. It was just.
It was a guard dog. It was what was it? A Mastiff or something? It was a big
I don't know
dog.
what it was. It was big.
German Shepherd,
But
a big dog.
He didn't lick it off, so
No,
he didn't hurt him.
he had a sticker on
But
him. Above
no one
Big
else
Adventure
would have
sticker.
that ability to put your sticker on that dog's rear quarter.
And you know what was one of the most satisfying things about that whole trip? I remember they were calling me the new Bob Hope because, and as you pointed out, that these people hadn't seen anybody from Rhode Island in months, 6, 7, 8 months they had been over there. And we pulled into Tezar, Hungary, is where the base was, right? Right at the border of the Bosnian border there, right?
Yeah.
And I remember being in the mess hall, and everybody was sitting down, and you introduced me, and I got up and started talking. I had a heckler. I don't know if you remember that, but I had this guy, a heckler. He was a cop here.
Yeah.
I won't say what city, but he was a cop here, and he was in the National Guard, and he got deployed, and he started heckling me. Oh, what the heck are you? Who are you? You don't know, you do a cable TV show. And I mean, everybody jumped all over him. And I felt so good about that. In my defense, they were all over him. Like, at least he came here. He come out to see us. Nobody else did. And this was during Christmas time. If you obviously you remember that, because we had a lot of fun. That was
I'm not sure he was doing that seriously, but he was doing it just as a matter of.
Oh yeah, he was playing. He was playing with me. Yeah, he was
Yeah.
definitely playing with
But-
me.
but
But
at
it
the
was
same
still
time,
nice the way they defended me. Is what I meant. No, I knew he wasn't because we chatted much.
But he
after
was
that.
on guard duty for the next 2 weeks.
They busted him up so bad No, but we had a lot of fun over
Yeah,
there.
that was good.
And I miss all the trips we used to go on.
Well, you know, of that particular trip, the highlight for me, and perhaps you too and others that went, was visiting those orphanages.
Oh my God!
was
Two
absolutely
orphanages we
phenomenal,
went
yeah.
to. That was
And I remember that we took literally hundreds of pounds of toys that Hasbro gave to us. We
Right.
took them over there, and
Well, you had
this
a
one
second- we
particular
had-
kid. This one particular kid was, I guess, 18 years old, and at that time they had a policy that anybody that was in an orphanage that was 17 or older was automatically in the military.
Right.
And he would go back to the orphanage at night. Well, and we passed out toys on Christmas Day, if you recall.
I do.
And we presented him a Hasbro toy
Yep.
of G.I. Joe, and the kid started crying
Yep.
because that was the first time he'd ever received any toy at all. And this kid's 18 years old.
Exactly.
Man, that broke everybody down. Now, I didn't cry. At least you didn't see me cry.
Right.
But if I cried, you would cry. It was just a tremendous experience that we'll never ever experience
Well, as a
again.
matter of fact, I did cry, and I'm man enough to admit it. I do remember having left the orphanage, and I went into the. They came looking for me. Somebody, for some reason, they thought I got captured or something because they couldn't find me. When
Well, that was a strong possibility.
yeah, well, where we were, we were in hostile territory, and I was so taken by giving out the toys to these kids, and I could think of my son at the time. You know, I missed my son. He was only a kid at the time. He was only 4 years old, I think, at the time, 4 or 5 years. Because we were there during Christmas. We went, what did we leave, the 22nd of December, come back the 29th, something like that?
Yeah, we were there for literally Christmas Day.
Right.
For another couple of days beyond that, but we were in the Azores.
The Azores
Christmas
before
Eve,
that,
yeah.
yeah. Well, anyway, I was taken by the some of the stories. These kids coming over and telling me their stories, and one kid telling me how he saw his father being killed, raped and killed. And oh my God, it was awful. And I went in the bus, and I bawled my eyes out.
Yeah. You know, it was perhaps to some extent new for me was that you were listening to these stories. To us, it was horrifying. To them, it was just matter of fact, day-to-day stuff that was happening to them.
Exactly.
Their whole families were
Exactly.
missing, atrocities were being committed, but to them it was a day-to-day scenario.
That was during the ethnic cleansing, folks.
Yeah.
If you don't know about that, the Bosnian crisis with the Croatians and the Bosnians, and they actually had a third group there too. There was 3 different groups.
I'm not sure. It
Those were the 2 major
yeah,
groups anyway.
but those are the 2 major ones. At the same time, it was just a matter of fact, day-to-day acceptance by these young kids, and they knew nothing else. And so when we came upon that, it was like, wow, that's something.
Right.
And to them it was, okay.
You know what brings me back to them? What makes me think of that whole thing, that whole Bosnian thing, is the movie Behind Enemy Lines.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah.
Didn't you think about
Yeah,
that
yeah,
place
yeah,
when you
yeah.
saw that movie?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's what.
Well, it was based upon that.
Yeah. But I mean, it absolutely puts me right back in that place.
Yeah.
What they went through in that country during that time. Imagine you're fighting your countrymen, you're fighting your relatives, your neighbors, not necessarily your relatives, but your neighbors.
I don't want to draw a wrong analogy, but this country went through that in the
the worst,
1863.
exactly, worst time ever
when
of this country.
Brothers were fighting brothers and
Right.
families against families, and I hope we never ever see that again. But you can't relate what happened to us in 1860s versus what happened to them, because there were different kinds of atrocities that were being
Right,
committed.
right.
We knew it because we read about it. When you're experiencing it day to day, that's a totally different
Sure is.
story.
Sure is. Well, that's why history is so important. You
If it's-
learn from
right,
history.
if it's told properly.
Exactly.
We have a
Truthfully.
propensity, however, to change it on occasion,
Yeah,
just to
yeah.
make sure that it's
Rework it a little bit.
politically correct.
Exactly, to
And,
rework it.
And you've heard me say this before, and I'll say it again.
Go ahead.
Political correctness will eventually be the demise
It
of
is
this
a
country.
demise, absolutely.
I really believe that.
That was going to be my next intro, by the way. I was going to say to you later on in this conversation, we are going to talk about political correctness and the problem it causes this country and its people and the diversity it causes, and the whole thing is wrong. But anyway, let's talk about the National Guard's role in 2016. I remember you were the best PR person for the Rhode Island National Guard. I mean, when you were in charge in the Rhode Island National Guard, you took media with you everywhere. and you allowed them to see a lot of things that they would never have gotten to see, in the world would have never gotten to see.
But you know how I did that? You told me to do it. You said, you're going to take me with you. And you might as well invite the other guys.
Yeah, take them too. Let them come along. We don't want
But I tell you, I often say this too, when you give me the opportunity, as you do now, you've done an awful lot for the God. And I don't think anybody ever could come across the kind of selflessness that you gave to the God.
we had fun.
And you did an awful lot. You were there. You told the story time and time again. You didn't charge us a penny. And I think that goes a long way to suggest the kind of character that you have about you and the patriotism that you have. Because, you know, these kids' families watch that all the time.
Exactly.
And that was their real chance to see what it was like without, you know, somebody saying, you can't say this, you can't say that.
Right.
They said exactly what they wanted to do. Oh,
And it
good
wasn't
stuff.
a soundbite. It wasn't
Right.
like a little newsreel.
Right.
I remember when we went to, I guess it was that trip too. I did a piece. Karen Adams was on Channel 12 at the time, and I did a piece. Remember, you had the Santa Claus and the
Yeah.
in the Jeep and
yeah.
the
Oh,
Humvee.
Hummers, yeah.
Humvee, I'm sorry. The Hummer set up. They cut the plywood and painted it and everything, and it looked like a Santa sleigh. And you had a guy dress up as Santa Claus, which was cool. It was fun. And then we had the caravan. What do we have? Like 10 Humvees
about-
with
yeah,
50
quite a few
caliber
in it,
machine guns on the top of them, going through the town.
And Jack Reed was with us too, and
Right.
that was tremendous to see that. And if you recall, we did a projection of real time with local TV stations about what we're experiencing, and
Right.
they gave us time in prime time
Exactly.
to be able to talk to families. And
Well, that's what I was
that
going
was
to
one
tell
of
you.
the first times they ever did that. You know,
Yeah.
that was good
And
stuff.
I ended up doing a piece on Channel 12 and Channel 10. I brought the video back, and it made it look like I was there right then. I did the piece, and it had Bob Venturini reporting for, on Channel 12, I just said Bob. And Karen Adams had a partner at the time. He was only there, I can't even remember his name. I don't think he was there a year. But he had said, he didn't give his last name, and it was Tony Petrarca said, that's Bob. Everybody knows who he was, which was hilarious because I did a 4.5 minute. They ran 4.5 minutes. I mean, you do stuff for Channel 12 now. A 4.5 minute piece on
That's
Channel
big.
12 without a
Yeah.
commercial.
Yeah, that's big.
I-
Mike Montecarlo, good, beautiful
Great guy.
and he interviews me every week. And,
Yep.
Behind the scenes, you get this. Okay, you got 2 minutes.
Right.
And
Yeah.
And you get to about 150, and you just number off camera.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't even answered the question yet.
Yeah.
But he's a master at being able to keep on time.
Yep.
And get the point across. And,
Well, he started in the radio, by the
he
way.
did back in West Warwick.
That's right.
Yeah, I knew him back then too.
Well, actually, in Woonsocket, too. He
Yeah.
worked in Woonsocket also.
But I think there's no one get come close to him to be able to orchestrate something within 2 minutes
Yep.
that appears to be 1 hour's worth of information. And he's just a master.
But
of it.
I was out, I stood out, had the camera set up, and I stood in front of the camera and I said, here I am in Taser, Hungary, reporting for CBS 12, and I go over the whole thing, go into the whole thing, I even had interviews and everything, and I go, and back to you, Karen. And then I set up in a different spot 20 minutes later, and I go, Gene, here we are in Taser, Hungary, and did the whole thing, and back to you, Gene Valicenti. This is Bob reporting for NBC 10. And both of them aired the sequences, they're separate pieces of the package is what they call them, I guess,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
On the news, like, I was home when they did it, like a week later. When we got home, I dropped the package off to each one of the stations, edited, and they ran them both.
See, that's a good testament to you because they both have confidence that you're not there for any other reason than to bring the true story back to the families.
Well,
and therefore, there's no competition.
Right,
You
right.
know, you're not trying to get a one up on 12 or 10 or
Right.
6 or anybody else.
You're right, because they both
This is
showed
the
it.
way it is.
They
yeah.
both aired
I
it.
think 6 had something in that too. I'm
They
not
did.
sure.
They
Yeah,
did. They're exactly right. You're exactly right. I did a piece for all three of them. I dropped them off to all three of them, and and they were all different pieces. They're all different pieces. I didn't want to give them the same thing and have, like you said, have somebody air it. And then I figured if I did do that anyway, one would air it and the other one wouldn't air it because it's the same thing.
You know, it's always amazing. You say when you preface a particular segment, you say, produced by Eyewitness News, WPRI, and Fox Providence. And then you go to Channel 10, you say NBC News, Channel 10, turn to 10 for news, and you go to 6, and you talk about whatever they have.
Right.
They go, and then all of a sudden, all we have to say is Bob.
Yeah,
And
that's what the
everybody
guy.
knows.
That's what the guy said.
Yeah.
The reporter said, or the anchor at the time, the co-anchor, Karen Adams, said he didn't even give his last name, and it was Tony. I'm sure it was Tony Petrarca. He goes, "That's Bobby. Everybody
you
knows
don't
who he
have
is." That was the best. I mean, my ego was this big after that. I couldn't believe it though, because this guy was going, "How can he get away with not even giving his name?"
Yeah.
But I don't have an ego problem. It's not. I don't need.
She's talking to me. You know?
Yeah. No, but I don't have that big need to be.
No, I'm
Out there.
I'm only crunching you up a little bit. But I said it in the beginning. You know, you don't do it for any other reason other than to tell the story, and you do it well, and it's very well appreciated.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you. I mean, I talk about you all the time, how much fun we had, how many places we've gone to over the years, how many things we've gotten to do together, flying over Puerto Rico with remember I got him to open the door, and we were flying over. I told him, you told me, I got him open up the door. We're flying.
Well, I was sleeping.
Yeah, we're flying over Puerto Rico with the door, the C-130 wide open so I can get good footage. And I said, yeah, the general told me, it's all set, we're all set, just do it, just do it.
You know, you made a point earlier. The God has made an awful lot of visibility through the years because of you and because of the kind of outreach that we made and making it very easy for people to come on board and see exactly what we do. Last several years have been a challenge for whoever the Adjutant-General was.
Right. And you've had a few changes too over the years too,
and,
right?
Because you know it is a different God today, and I think they're trying to do the best they can with whatever they have to deal with. But I think now it's a different story too, and you have a brand new Adjutant General,
Yep.
Chris Callahan. He's going to do a fine
Good
job.
guy.
Right. So you need
Chris
to
Callahan.
you need to
from
reach
here.
out and get him to sit in this chair.
Yeah,
and get him to talk to you.
yes. Because I remember him when the very first show I did, as we talked about off camera, was the air show at Quonset Point, May 29th, 24 years ago, this May 29th it will be, that I did, 1992, that I did. My show was the very first television show that I hosted, totally, my show. And it was because of the Rhode Island National Guard that I am on TV today. Well, you're here today.
I was just about ready to retire right about that time. I retired, I guess it was in August or September of '92 for several years. And
how long had you been in already by '92? Because you started from the
from
bottom.
57.
You started in '57.
Yeah, 57. I was entered at the rank of private, and I went up through Sergeant E5 or Specialist 5. Went to OCS in 61.
Yeah.
Was commissioned in 62, and I was the youngest officer to be commissioned in the Rhode Island Guard. I was commissioned on my birthday, in fact,
Wow.
in July of 23rd in 1962. And then I made it up through each rank to colonel, and then I retired in '92 for a few years and played with a couple of bands and did some real estate.
Right.
And that was the time I wanted to commit a felony every single day in real estate. Didn't like it at all.
Yeah.
But the band kept me sane.
Right.
And then Governor Almond called me back in '95, and
Now, did you replace Holland?
No.
Right after somebody
No.
between you, right?
General Kiley replaced Holland.
Okay.
Trudeau replaced Kiley, and I
And then
replaced
you
Trudeau.
replaced Trudeau. Okay.
And,
Yeah.
that
'Cause
was
I
a
went to
s-
school with Holland's kid,
Yeah,
Glenn.
Glenn.
I
Yeah,
graduated
Glenn
from
and
high
Greg.
school with
Okay.
him. Yeah.
And Holland was the Adjutant General for 22 years. I was
You
the
beat
second.
that.
No.
You didn't?
No. I served a little over 10 years.
Did you really?
But I was the
No,
second-
but you were in there forever.
Yeah, in the Guard I was
Yeah.
in there. I was in the Guard before Holland was
So
in the Guard.
you were, what'd you say, 57 to 92? That's
Well,
what,
it's
35 years?
48 years.
Yep.
Yeah, total. To
Right,
include the 3 years I was in the retired reserve, which is, it's referred to as, not time in service, but, your span of time in the military, including the 3 years of retired that I was from 92 to 95. So when I was called back by Governor Almond, then I assumed the rank of Brigadier General and then to
Right.
Major General and retired in 2005, basically because of my age. There's a couple of formula that they use. One has to do with age. Once you reach a particular age, you lose your federal recognition. And so you can continue to be on, but it's not a
Right.
good position to be in as the Adjutant General serving with no federal recognition.
What do you mean by federal recognition?
That means that once you reach age 64 as the Adjutant General, you
Right.
lose your federal recognition, means you mandatorily retire. But you can stay on as the Adjutant General
Right.
in a retired status, which is not a good deal because you're competing for parity with the other states.
Right.
And when you're looked upon as a retired Adjutant General,
You got no
still-
drag, in other words.
Well, not so much that. They look at you as a grandfather. Yeah. In fact, that, plus being the smallest state,
Right.
I used to sit between Texas and in South Carolina.
Wow.
And every time I'd stand up, they'd pull me down by my belt and say, I got ranches bigger than you. Sit down. Be quiet.
You got ranches bigger than you.
But I get over that. It wasn't a matter of size. It was a matter of, how much you brought to the table.
Yeah,
In fact,
you always brought your
in fact, I used to make the point, though, because we're small, that doesn't mean anything. It means at low tide, we beat many states.
That's right. Yeah, there you go.
So that.
But you
seems-
always made your presence known anyway when you went. To
Well,
those
I
meetings.
always felt that, it really doesn't matter where you're from.
Right,
If you
exactly,
If you can
exactly.
talk from factual need and a point of making sure that you were relevant in the war fight, and that you had as much right to have a brand new C-130 as the next state did.
Right.
And you have a right
Which
to
you did a
have
good job of
yeah,
getting
we
those
did.
J's. We were
And
the
thanks
first to get the J's.
Thanks to Senator Reed.
That's right.
Tremendous guy. He
That's
got us
right.
we were the first
First, I know
state
that.
in the country to get C-130Js, which is a stretch 130.
Right.
We were the first state to go to war with those planes too.
Exactly.
With Colonel Larry Glowley.
In fact, that banner over there, right there. Remember when we had the guys sign that, guys
Yeah.
and gals sign that?
Yeah.
When the first deployment,
Yeah.
they signed that banner.
Yeah. So the point is that if you can demonstrate that there's a relevance and a need, doesn't matter what size state you are, it's whether you have the capacity to fill your federal mission,
Right.
and we did that rather well because of our outstanding soldiers and airmen.
Exactly.
The airplanes don't mean a lot. The
Well,
helicopters, it's the
and
people
being
that
on the
fly them.
sidelines, I noticed the morale that the soldiers had because of you being
Well,
there.
I don't like to put me in the middle of that. What I like to do is to be able to at least acknowledge that we tried to make it a good environment.
Well, you
and to
showed
give
the
them the best
professionalism too. You had the
Yeah, well,
professionalism.
I think any good commander would demand, professionalism.
Right.
And you need to demonstrate it. If you can't demonstrate it and you can't demand it, you shouldn't be in that position.
When did this whole thing change? The National Guard, I used to think as a kid, meant that you protected the nation. When did they decide to send them off the war to other countries? When was that?
1903. The
The
1903
what,
was
the
referred
Spanish-American War?
was referred to as the Dick Act. A Representative Dick
Right.
introduced legislation in the Congress that gave federal recognition to the National Guard. Before that, it was just referred to as state militia,
Right, right.
and then it got dual status. And so you had a National Guard unit, which was a militia unit, and then they granted federal recognition, and that, in fact, made it part of the United States Army, being a reserve component of the United States Army.
Sure.
So you had the Army today consists of the United States Army active duty,
Yes,
reserve component, National Guard,
right.
which has a duality to it, state mission and federal mission, and the Army Reserve. So that triad, if you will, constitutes the United States Army. And that didn't happen until that was
1903.
yeah, until that was extended by the congressional recognition of the Guard as a federal entity.
Now today, what do we look at as the biggest threat to the United States?
The biggest threat is being able to be relevant in whatever's going to be facing us. As an example, I've said so many times too in the past that, if there was a nuclear detonation somewhere in the country,
Right.
that would be terrible. If there was a dirty bomb, that would be terrible. Biological, chemical, that would be terrible. But we would eventually get over it, as we have in many other things.
Right.
The one major area that is of most consequential to me is cyber terrorism. You can shut this country down
Right,
instantly.
right. Exactly, yeah.
Because if you
can open up a dam, they can open up the,
yeah,
right?
but
They could
well,
create,
not so much that. I mean, that's a physical consideration. My concern is if they were able to disable our ability to do financial transactions on a
Right.
day-to-day basis, you may as well shut the country down, because that is an area that we can't possibly do anything about.
Well, if they shut the stock market down.
Right. You can't do, if I made out a check to you for some service that you required of me, and you couldn't cash it, you'd come and get me.
Right.
And similarly, anything of consequence that depends on everybody else's financial well-being to transact the good, solid economy, if that's taken away, then you have tremendous problems,
Right.
apathy, lawlessness, and everything goes with it.
Right.
So cyber terrorism, I think, is a big challenge. And if you look at what's going on today with the tremendous compromise of records within OPM, Office of Personnel Management, Russia has tremendous capability to come
And
into
China.
this country. China, all those countries.
North Korea, Iran.
And many people think that because the ISIS and because Al Qaeda are living in caves allegedly, they're as smart as anybody
And
else.
they still got computers.
They got computers and they can perhaps hack into anything that we're able to try to build firewalls to protect us against, but they're still able to compromise that.
Now, what happened to Al Qaeda? We don't hear about Al Qaeda anymore.
Al Qaeda is Al Qaeda itself means a network. That was the term that was used for terrorists to some
Right. The
extent. for some time.
Taliban and Al Qaeda. Are they
Yeah,
two different
Tal-
groups or are
they're
they
two
the same
different
group?
groups? They're two different groups in essence, but they all have the same core value about trying to destroy the West.
Right.
And they're trying to compete with each other. So right now you have ISIS, which
Yes.
claims to be taking most of the world.
Well, they certainly taking the world's attention.
The world concentrates right now on what ISIS is doing.
Right.
But that doesn't mean to say Al Qaeda has disappeared
Right.
or the Taliban has
Well, they're
disappeared.
still in Yemen anyway.
Hamas is, they're all in existence.
Right.
So Al Qaeda means the networking of many, many terrorist organizations. ISIS is a state that they're trying to establish on its own.
Now, isn't ISIS made up of people that from Syria and people from Iraq that are disenfranchised, like the Iraqi, the Royal Guard of Iraq? And
ISIS is referred to as the Islamic State,
Right.
and that means that anybody.
ISIS or ISIL?
Yeah, it depends on who's saying it.
Right.
But
The
ISIS
president
Islamic
always
State.
refers to it as ISIL. Why is that?
Well, I think, I don't want to get political. Certainly not.
Why not?
Well, because I signed a contract saying I wouldn't. But at the same time, for us to identify the enemy is first and foremost to be able to defeat them.
Right.
And so we're not saying all Muslims are terrorists. What we are saying is the Islamic State is using the Islam as a vehicle to
Sure.
conduct its business across
Right.
the
To
world.
justify it,
Yeah.
actually.
And so consequently, that must be recognized. At the same time, we need to understand that in the United States, there are cells, and this is not my opinion, it's been well
Factual.
publicized. There are cells all over the United States. And we see it right here in this state. You had one in Warwick,
Right.
and you had one in North Kingstown.
Yep.
And 2 days before the Boston bombings, this guy, Tsarnaev, was killed. 2 days before, he signed a clearance for his citizenship, saying he was a perfect citizen,
Right.
didn't have any intentions of doing any harm to anybody, and 2 days later he
Right.
unleashed the Boston
So
bombing.
much for that.
So bottom line is every single state has possibilities, and I'm convinced that every single state has cells that eventually will be called in to fulfill whatever mission they have. And that's where it gets very scary.
Well, it certainly does get scary.
No.
And,
No.
and what about the families of the people impacted by these people?
It's a good question. And the thing is that families, when I was in office, I used to refer to as a three-legged stool. You have the soldier, you have the family, and you have the employer. If you take out any one of those legs, it'll fall.
Right.
And so families have been terrifically.
And you always
impacted.
paid a lot of attention to the family.
Well, you have to,
when
because,
the people were deployed and when the military came back.
Yeah.
And we were always there.
Yeah, right.
We were
Every
always
deployment, every homecoming, you were there. Because it's important to see the families need to understand that you're supporting them the best you can. But that has migrated into a real threat and a challenge that we've not seen since Vietnam, perhaps. suicide is becoming a very real problem.
Serious.
Serious problem.
And they don't play it up enough, I don't think. I don't
Well,
think they let us,
Well,
they bring it up enough.
No, they don't talk about it openly enough, but
why?
because I'm not sure why, except PTSD, which is a post-traumatic stress disease, means that it's an emotional handicap versus a physical one that
Something
you can
can't see, yeah.
Right. But part of that PTSD has as a possibility a long-term solution to a short-term problem, and that's suicide. And suicide is based upon mainly three areas, mainly family kind of stuff.
Right.
You know, either financial,
Or physical,
marital,
the wife's marital problems.
alcohol, drugs,
Right.
those kinds of things that manifest themselves when these kids come home.
Yes.
And there's a different part of the story too. Even 10 years ago, maybe more than that, you would think that a normal deployment meant that a male individual would leave his wife and children
Right.
home.
Not the case
Today
anymore.
you have a wife being deployed and
That's
the
right.
husband stays home.
That's right.
Or more importantly, you have a father and his father, or a mother and her daughter being deployed.
Or two brothers.
Two brothers, or the whole
two
family.
sisters,
And so these kids are put in someone else's care for a
Right.
period of time. So when they come home, the entire thing changes. Sometimes that's not able to be handled, and you refer to it as a psychological challenge. And unfortunately, sometimes kids look at it as the only solution is to commit
is
suicide,
yeah.
and that's no solution.
Well, because you think about it, you think I've seen people that I know, they get deployed and they come back and they definitely have a different attitude about life, especially if they've had to kill somebody.
Yeah.
And they don't want to talk about it, of course, most of them.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen, and they let it build up.
Besides that too, Bob, I think you saw, and we were talking about it earlier, you know, what they're subjected to, that when you're at home in America, you see stuff happening. You know, we see shootings about every night, but it doesn't impact them personally.
Right.
When you're in a war zone,
Exactly.
even though you're not in direct combat, you're seeing a lot of stuff, and you're thinking about home, and you're thinking about what impact is this going to have on me? Am I going to wake up tomorrow morning? Those kinds of things all, get to the point.
And to be dealing with that on a
where they're
daily and
boiling.
nightly basis, too.
Right.
They're worried about if they're going to make it home
Yeah.
tomorrow.
And that's part of the problem. And when they do come home, they see a different place that they left.
Right.
And that's part of the problem about
They
raising
see
a
it
family
differently.
chain,
It
yeah.
may not have changed at all, but they
Well,
see it in a
perhaps
different
you're
way.
right. Yeah.
Sometimes it does change, but
Yeah.
sometimes it does not change.
Yeah.
But they see it in a different light.
Yeah.
They're more irritable.
And they're paying attention to a lot of other things too. I'm not sure you're going to get to the things that we talked about earlier, but they're also thinking about what's going to happen next year, what's going to happen 6 years from now,
Right.
what's going to happen 2 months from now. They hear constant things about North Korea.
Oh, yeah, that was my
attempting
next
to build
question,
its
actually.
missile capability
Yeah.
to deliver it, and they say it.
And they don't, and you don't, they're the wild card because you don't know what he's going to do.
Yeah.
The dictator of North Korea.
So you got that, and
He's
then
out
you got
there.
Iran, and Iran has said many times that their sole purpose on earth is
To
to
get rid
destroy
of
Israel. And they're developing weapon systems. And I personally think that whole Iran nuclear deal was a very bad deal.
Awful.
So
Awful.
consequently, what's
Awful.
happening is they've got a lot of money back, and you can't tell me that money isn't going into development for further systems.
I believe that the reason the gasoline in oil is so cheap now is, correct me if I'm wrong, is because Saudi Arabia, which is the biggest producer of oil in the world, and Saudi Arabia does not get along with Iran. I believe that they purposely kept the price of oil down by keeping the production up because Iran has now got the ability to sell their oil. And if they had allowed the oil cut back production, which OPEC would like them to do and we would like them to do, if they cut back on oil production, which would bring the price of oil back up and help the stock market, the regular Joe Blow wouldn't like it because the prices of gasoline will go up. But by keeping it down, keeping production up and keeping the price down, what they've done is they've made the Iran oil less valuable, which means they have less money to spend on their advanced military.
That's part of the overall possibilities. What is more important is that most recently, the OPEC countries, minus Iran and minus Syria, minus Iraq, have all said we're going to try to decrease the amount of production that we're having because we realize it's making a worldwide impact.
Sure it is.
At the same time, Iran says we're not going to cut back, and neither are the other two countries. So they're continuing to build it. The philosophy and the methodology that's being used to defeat ISIS in Syria it seems to be working to some extent.
Right.
If we're targeting their oil production, because that's where they get a lot of money.
Exactly.
We're targeting their financial ability to transact, paying their ISIS volunteers.
Sure.
That's a bad word, volunteer. They're not volunteering.
They're not volunteering.
They're getting
They're
paid.
nuts.
And they've cut, in the last 2 weeks, they've cut their salaries in half.
Right.
And they've cut many things out of the equation that caused a lot of these people to want to come to ISIS. And so now they're starting to see it's not a nice place to be.
It's not all
so
it's cracked
they
up
are
to be.
starting to see some impact on that.
Right.
So back to oil for a minute. Oil in the United States, we made a commitment that we're going to get off fossil fuels. We're going to
Right.
become not so dependent upon foreign oil.
Self-dependent, we're going to
Well,
supposedly.
there's a lot to go with that
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
You know, when you
exactly.
do this, you're losing to some extent the impact on the stock market.
Right.
And we're not fast enough to build up a dependency on natural gas and solar and wind.
Right.
But that has a slow migration to be able to depend on that versus taking our dependency on fossil fuel so quickly.
Right.
And so that's a consideration too that the stock market is reacting to.
Well, that's what. How about Donald Trump saying that if he was over there in Iraq, and I said this anyway, and a lot of other people did too. Why didn't we take their oil from them right from the start to pay off the debt that we were incurring?
Because that goes right back to the thing we talked about in the very opening statement you made about political correctness. Sometimes the right thing to do isn't always popular.
Right.
In fact, if you remember, I said this too to my staff. You know, a right decision most times is a very unpopular decision.
Right. Exactly.
And a wrong decision sometimes is a popular decision, and doesn't mean right. It's right. So when you have the kind of impact on political correctness, you know, it would be nice to say we're going to go over there, we're going to take your oil,
Right.
and we're going to sell it to you.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
Well, not only that,
But it's not doable.
Yeah, I know, because of the $31 trillion, whatever we spent over there, we would not have spent that. We could have used that money to rebuild our entire infrastructure.
Sure, we could. On the other hand, we could build a beautiful infrastructure and have beautiful bridges in Rhode Island and not have any highway problems on any one of our states.
But
if we take away all of the foreign aid that we give to these countries, we could fix that in a year.
right,
The problem is what happens. You create a vacuum. And when you create a vacuum in those countries, who moves in? Russia.
right,
And who moves in? All these ISIS organizations to pick up the void and the vacuum that you've
yeah,
created.
but taking that oil wouldn't have caused that.
It would cause a lot of problems. You know,
You think?
we can talk about it as a matter of trying to play a game on the board here, but it would not go over well, and I don't think it's sustainable, because you'd have to defend it to begin with.
Yeah.
Once you take them, who's going to defend?
Well,
it?
we were defending it for years anyway.
Nah, it's different.
Do you
story.
actually think we had the right to go in there in the first place?
Based upon the information and intelligence that was available to the President of the United States and the Congress and every other country that signed on, recognizing that, yes, there were weapons of mass destruction
Right.
in Iraq, everybody agreed to it.
Yeah, but we're the
Now-
only ones who went in.
We went in there as a coalition,
Wha-
not a significant one.
No,
but we
yeah,
went in.
exactly.
But at the same time, everybody that went in under that premise that there were weapons of mass destruction. Let me bring you back a few years. When we were doing the same thing in Iraq,
Yep.
we said that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. He demonstrated he did by killing many Kurds. And then all of a sudden, we said, we're coming in to check you with the United Nations. He said,
Right.
no, you're not. Every time they went in, he said, no, you're not. 13 years went by. Where do you think those weapons went? They were there at one point, I'm convinced.
Syria?
Perhaps I'm not sure, but they were there at one point. And there was evidence that there was weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. But if you give them all that kind of time
Right.
to be able to divest
Yeah,
themselves
so
of
why
that,
did we give them all that kind of time?
because of political correctness. You know, you can't do things unilaterally and expect the entire world to be on your side.
Right.
You try to appease this way. you
Yeah,
try to
but then,
appease that one.
because if we did go in there right away, we found the weapons of mass destruction, we would have been a hero to the world.
But we can Monday morning quarterback the game
Right,
that
yeah.
took place this last Saturday.
Well, the thing that troubles me about that whole thing is we went in there after 9/11, and the theory, the thought was what a lot of people was, we're going in there to get the bad guys. The fact of the matter is 16 out of 19 of the people that were involved in 9/11 were from Saudi Arabia. They weren't from Iraq.
You're right. But once again, you have a philosophy across the Mideast. You don't know where they're from. They can come from, in this case, in the United States, you have people who think differently in every one of our states. We don't think the same as
Right.
South Carolina.
But we can't. We could never control those people in that part of the world. And Afghanistan, look at it. Russia's right next door to them, and they couldn't deal with. They couldn't handle them.
There's some philosophy today, if you would. It's a good word to use or not, but they're saying, well, okay, if we'd have left Saddam in power, we'd have had no problem.
Right.
If we'd have left Gaddafi in power, there'd have been no problem. But our concern about both those individuals is human rights and the things they
Well,
were
I
doing
think
to
the
other
worst
people.
part of them, it was their kids, was Saddam Hussein's kids. They were nuts. Those
Yeah.
kids were having parties.
Well,
and-
the point, when I finish the point, is that both those individuals at the time were real bad guys.
Right.
Well, you can look back on it now and say, we weren't too bad at all.
No kidding.
Based upon what we got. And so that's an argument and debate to be
Right,
had
right,
perhaps for the next
exactly,
generation.
Exactly.
Now, let's go to Cuba for a minute. You bet 1959, I remember that. You know,
Right.
and right after that, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Sure.
And I was a brand new lieutenant in 1962, and Cuban Missile Crisis came about.
And do you know where I did a
we
show?
we came very close to a bad scene.
Exactly, we did with Khrushchev.
Yeah.
I actually did a show on the island that they used as a practice for the Bay of Pigs invasion. It's off the coast of
Did you?
Florida. It's called Yosepa Island. It's a little tiny private island, totally self-contained. They make their own water. They have their own electricity on the island. It's pretty cool. It's 1 mile off the coast of Fort Myers, Florida, and I went around Fort Myers asking people if they ever heard of Yosepa, and I don't know the exact numbers, but I'll bet you 80 to 85% of the people had no idea. And it was right off the coast there. You could not pull your boat there. You could some of those islands, Cabbage
When
Island.
you
whatever.
talk back to the people right here in this state, didn't
Oh,
realize.
go Block
that,
Island.
Well, not so much Block Island, but all the islands around Newport were pretty heavily,
Fortified.
well, Narragansett Bay in itself
Right.
was totally protected because of the concerns we had with torpedo making in the area and so
Right,
forth.
right.
And the fact that we had a
operation.
concentration camp in the area too.
What, on Dutch Island?
Well, not in. You don't want to go classify. But the thing is that people don't understand, and I'm not trying to draw an analogy about Rhode Island or anything that you're talking
Right.
about, but when you look at Germany and you look at the concentration camps that were right outside the gate, people claim they didn't know that was going on.
Right.
Now, whether they did or didn't is debatable too.
Right.
So the point is that people, and as we get into this new presidential election, there's a lot of bad things going on. People don't really realize the importance and the significance of making sure we got somebody in the presidency that's going to get this country through the next several
Right.
years.
Right.
It's a huge task, and there's too much theater going on.
Well,
with,
especially
yeah.
now, if you want to get into that. You want to get into that? You want to get
Well, I
into
don't
that?
want to get into politics, but I'm talking about just the basis for how we're going about listening to the people who are running for the presidency. There doesn't seem to be any civility
No.
there.
A huge mistake, first of all, allowing them to these super PACs and allowing them all the money to spend. And this election is going to cost in the billions of dollars. When all the dust settles and the smoke clears, the money spent mostly by the Republican Party and by the Democrats too is going to be in the several billions area. I can remember studying politics at Roger Williams University, now college back then, and The Making of a President, Theodore Francis White. He wrote several books, and one of them was the selling of a president, and it was Richard, and I think it was a package of Lucky Strikes, and it had a picture of I think Richie Nixon in the center of it. They spent $40 million to get him elected that year. And I'm saying, that is chump change, because that's the interest on the money they're spending nowadays
Yeah.
on
You see,
political
and the
campaigns.
point that should be discussed is of the millions and perhaps billions of dollars that will eventually be spent for this election, most of it goes toward the criticizing of
The opponent,
the
yeah,
opponent
right.
versus the
Right.
issues.
And
that
nobody's
need to be-
talking about issues.
Nobody's talking about issues. And I hope that once all this stuff goes beyond the primaries, that once you get the two remaining individuals,
Right.
they will convert to talking about issues.
Right.
Because if they continue to bash each other,
Oh, my God, it's
gonna
awful.
be-
It's
that'll,
awful.
That'll set the stage for the next 4 years.
Well, what it was set the stage for is a third-party candidate, somebody to come in after we're at Super Tuesday today, by the way, folks. After Super Tuesday, if as they're saying happens, if they project Trump to win most of the states for the Republican primary, and if that's the case, at least 2 or 3 of the candidates will drop out after. I predict by next week, at least 2 of the candidates will drop out. And it will put, at least it'll be down to Trump and maybe 1 other, 2 maximum. It's going to be Rubio, Cruz, and Trump remaining. And all they're going to do is just bash each other's heads in and make each other look so bad that none of them will be electable. So the Republicans are already talking about it, throwing in somebody else. And the
Well,
guy,
you know,
Bloomberg, is the obvious
Well, you know, once again,
possibility.
I don't want to get into either siding with any particular. I just want to talk about what appears to be a very bad,
Very bad, very
presidential
bad.
election. You guys, so who's in there
Right.
and from what party? You know, we are completely overlooking what is important to this country.
Exactly.
That is the security of the country,
Yes.
the economy of the country, and no one is really talking about that other than it's going to be better after they're in.
Speaking of security, what nobody talks about, we'll go back to political correctness for a minute here. Illegal immigration. What is illegal? It's not just a sick bird. Illegal means it's against the law. And when you allow people to cross a border and you have no idea who they are that are crossing the border, you don't know if they're Al Qaeda, you don't know if they're ISIS, you don't know who they are. You know, the bleeding heart liberals, as you might call them, that say, oh, we shouldn't have a border, let everybody come in, let everybody come in. That is not protecting this country.
It isn't. On the other hand, you know, I'm trying to be, I don't want to seem like I'm talking from both sides of my mouth. I'm not. I said that in the very beginning. Security is absolutely essential.
Exactly.
And a wise immigration policy is part of that security. You can't shut down immigration.
No, you can't shut it down, but
Because you
you've
wouldn't be
got
here and I
to
wouldn't
control
be here.
it.
Right.
You've got to control
There has to be a system to be able to say,
Right.
if we're going to allow 100 people in,
We wanna know who
from
they are.
wherever, we got to know who they are.
Where they come from,
Now, here's
and
the
what their
challenge.
intent is.
Here's the challenge. You get people from Syria, and you say, how are you going to vet them? There's no way you can vet them.
No.
And a good example of that is the Tsarnaev brother. 2 days before he committed the bombing, he
Right.
was going to be a U.S.
Got to be an
citizen.
American. He wants to be an
Totally-
American.
So how can you do that?
And that
realistically?
family from California.
Right.
that
So
husband
how
and
can you
wife from
possibly do
California.
that when there's no place to vet it to?
Right, right.
You don't have the information. You don't have fingerprints. You don't have anything other than, I want to be a good American, but I'm going to kill you tomorrow.
So we're talking about those people they want to send over here from Syria, the refugees.
Not necessarily Syria, but anybody coming into the country who doesn't want to come here to be a citizen and do good for the country
Right.
rather than come here and try to kill us. Now, that's the challenge.
Right.
And political correctness has no part in that.
No, exactly right. And that's why I have such a problem with you got a border now, and there's 700 miles of the border presently. It doesn't have even a fence. There's part of the border in Arizona and Texas that goes over tribal land that has no fence at all, nothing.
Okay, my concern, once again, I don't want to seem like I'm double talking. I'm not. If I'm seemingly doing that, you need to tell me.
I'm going to tell you.
You can have people coming in through a 700-mile border, and I would suggest to you that the majority of those people only want to look at a better life.
We're not talking about a majority. It only takes one.
Let me get there. Most of the people coming in just want to get out of wherever they are
Right,
for a
yeah.
better life. My concern is the people we allow to come in, even though we vet them correctly, there's still a danger unless you have an absolute system to be able to determine who's coming in here.
Right.
And every time we look at who committed the worst atrocities here in this country in the last several years, they all came in legitimately,
Right.
and they changed in a couple of days. So you can say you don't have a border. You can also have a system that allows people to come in and you vet them properly, and they can change on you instantly.
Right.
We are in trouble about how you do that. I don't have the solution to
Right,
it,
right.
but apparently nobody else does either.
Yeah, but at least you got their fingerprints, you got their picture, you got something to catch them, some way of catching them. When you're bringing people in here and you have absolutely no idea where they're from, who they are, what their intentions are, I mean, that's a real. No other country does that, do they? Any other country? Well, maybe Canada.
Well, you can rest assured that Saudi Arabia doesn't do it at all.
Right.
Because they understand. Now, there's a new philosophy that I've recently read about. It's not called jihad. It's called another had. I can't remember the exact terminology, but it has to do with a legitimate infiltration of people coming into a society and changing that society from within.
Right.
Changing the culture.
Which is, by the way, some of the philosophy, they say, of some of the Mexican people, because they think that we took Texas and California and Arizona and New Mexico from them, and they want to take it back. And the way to take it back is from within. We flood the southwest. That's a philosophy
Yeah,
of some
it is.
people.
Some people think that way.
And
I wanna get
that's
one.
where
I'm
that-
not sure how close we are.
No,
to
we
the
got
end
enough
here.
time. That's
But I
where
want
some
to
of the
get a
anchor
point in here.
babies
I want to
come
get
in.
a
Go
point
ahead.
here. To the first time I heard this today, which is troubling to me. He had a 4-star general on a recent interview. General Hayden talked to a host,
Right.
and he was talking about the concern that he feels that that's a retired 4-star. He's concerned about the military, and the military being able to not understand that a president who's elected into office legitimately may not be the one that's going to enforce the Constitution or pay attention to laws.
Right.
And consequently, the first time I ever heard anybody saying the military might have to intervene.
Martial law.
Well, not so much martial law. The other guy talked about a coup, which is way beyond anybody's thinking. But when somebody starts thinking about that,
That's scary.
It's concerning.
You better believe it
You know,
is.
because if you
That
look
puts-
at who the president is he or she going to comply with the laws of the United States?
Right.
And if they don't, then who's going to keep this country in line?
Right.
You know, it's a scary proposition. When they start talking like that,
Yeah.
it's bothersome to me.
Yeah, you
So the
thinking
way
like
to
that's
preclude
enough.
that is to make sure you get out and vote legitimately.
Right, right.
Vote and make sure we put the right person in.
And that's got to be a challenge for everybody with all the stuff that's going on. Because all you're hearing is throwing stuff against the wall and hoping something sticks to people.
Yeah.
They're not talking about issues or concerns and national concerns that affect everybody in this country.
Yeah.
I mean, I like some of the stuff that Sanders says. I mean, I like some of the stuff that Trump says.
Yeah.
But not if he had toned it down a little bit, he'd be much better off.
Well, I think, once again, my opinion, having nothing to do with endorsement for anybody.
Right.
I want to make sure I clear that right on the front end. I signed a legitimate understanding with the media that I would never talk
Right.
partisan, and I'm not.
Right.
What I'm talking about is my observations from time to time. And you get, a candidate who's saying a lot of things that people want to hear, but they're not doable, legitimately doable. And you have another candidate who has an acumen of being able to dodge the bullet, so to speak, and never really come up as to
Never really say anything.
admitting this.
Talking, yeah.
No, and then you have a third candidate who's making a lot of promises that are not deliverable.
Right.
And we have right now an $18 trillion debt. To accommodate some of those promises would bring us to about $36 trillion,
exactly.
which is not sustainable.
Right,
So
exactly.
all those observations are not endorsements, nor are they
Sure.
taking away from anyone. And they're just observations.
Right.
I think are shared by a lot of people. And so the decision is going to be who goes into that voting booth and votes based upon what they really understand and what they're being told, other than bashing other people.
Well, but by the way, that's where again comes in the illegal immigration, because I was the victim way back with voter fraud when I first ran for office in 1972, believe it or not, and I lost in a 3-man race after a recount by 2 votes.
Really?
And there were 7 laws I not only challenged, I not only complained of, but I proved there were 7 laws that they violated, and I proved every one of them that the ward committee and the rep committee in my district violated. It cost me a heck of a lot more than 2 votes. I mean, we had 8 polling places in my district. I won 5 of them. When 7 of the 8 polling places come in, Reggie, I was winning the election. The last polling place. Now I won 5 out of 7 up to this point. 1 more left, and I'm winning in 3 figures. The last one come in, I lost 5-1. Gee, well, that was weird. That was weird. I lost by 2 votes. They found 18 and 25 and 18 and 25 and 10, I think it was. Does that come up to 53? 53 votes on 3 machines. How does that happen? I mean, how
I don't know. The only thing I can have some good feeling about, to some extent, a personal experience I've had too, as you did, when I ran for lieutenant governor.
Right.
You know, I won the primary handily.
Right.
And I said, boy, this is feeling good.
Yeah.
And I lost the general election.
Yep.
Because, you know, you can't measure what's going to happen in the general election by what happens in the primary.
Many times it goes the opposite
So
way.
consequently, you know, everybody's all hyped up about a particular individual winning the primary.
Right.
He's not necessarily, or she's not necessarily going to be the president. It depends on who the general election.
That's right. Changes
cycle
everything.
takes.
Because in the
Because
primary, you got
You only
8 people running,
Yeah.
and the votes going all every which way.
Yeah,
But when it
and-
comes to
and
the
it's
general,
only, in the primaries, only from that particular party.
right?
You have a big crunch of people out there who are
It's called
independents.
independents,
Right.
and they
They make the
represent the
difference, yeah.
bulk of the electorate.
Not to mention the people who voted intentionally to get a particular individual
Right.
from primary so that
Right.
he would
Get the
inflate it.
weaker,
Yeah.
get the weaker person
So
up
you go-
there.
yeah,
Oh,
so
we know the
it's-
game.
yeah.
We know the game.
Yeah.
We both did that. We
Yeah.
both ran for lieutenant governor, and then I ended up working for the guy that ended up becoming lieutenant governor. I like that one.
Yeah, how about that?
Well, Reggie, it's always fun when you come around.
Well,
We
it's
never have
certainly-
enough time. We still got a whole bunch of things we could go through, but we're not going to get to them. All right, what do you want to talk about? You got 30 seconds. What do you want to get in?
Gitmo is a good
I was going to
example.
say
Yeah.
that. Gitmo.
Yeah, you and I have been there.
Cuba, go ahead.
Cuba, and once again,
They wanna
not
close it.
political, absolute mistake
To close it.
to close it.
Because
Yeah.
you got to bring those people here.
They're going to have to go someplace.
Right.
Now, the philosophy is being used. Well, it's causing an ability for recruitment by ISIS.
Right.
Because
No,
They're still
not as
gonna
much
be-
as it would here.
that's exactly right.
They'd have more access.
it's-
The media would have so much more access
That's
to them.
exactly right. It's more of a psychological thing to have in the United
Absolutely.
States than it is in Gitmo. But beyond that, you mark my words now. In 24 years from now, you'll be having somebody else here. And you'll be
24 years from now.
say, he said that.
I don't know
in
if I survived
2015.
24 weeks. Go ahead.
I will tell you, once again, this is just my own feeling, but I've been around a long time and I
Yep.
see things unfolding. There will be a time when Guantanamo Bay itself will be a pawn as part of the negotiations for normalization with Cuba. If you don't have Gitmo there, why are you there? And so consequently, I think
Right.
that's a real possibility.
Ah, yes.
It's we want you out of here.
Right.
Incidentally, since 1959, when Castro won the
Baptista.
Baptista.
Knocked out Baptista.
they've not cashed a check by the United States for the rent that we pay for that base since '59.
They have not
So you
cashed a
can't
check.
tell me that they want us there. And so there would undoubtedly that'll be at some point.
So you're saying
discussion.
if they close up Gitmo, we'd have no reason to be there.
That's not the reason that we should stay there.
Right.
The
Right.
reason is we have a base there. We have a 99-year lease,
Yes.
and we need to maintain that.
And what happens when the lease comes up?
Well, that's a different story. I mean, 99 years from now, who knows?
Yeah, but that's not a new lease. It's not
No,
right
no,
now.
It's been about, I'm not sure how old it is.
No,
but
I think it's quite a while already.
Even
Hey,
40 or 50 years.
We're
from
out of time there, kiddo.
now. See, you did
Thank
this.
you.
Always good to be here.
Always a pleasure.
We'll see you another
Reggie
time.
Centracchio, the Adjutant-General Emeritus, right?
You got it.
Of the Rhode Island National Guard.
No, of Rhode Island. See, that's a misnomer too.
What? Of the what?
Adjutant General of Rhode Island Emeritus. The Adjutant General is a state position.
Oh,
The
okay.
Commanding General of the Rhode Island National Guard
Oh.
is the
Excuse me.
See, I got to keep you straight.
Excuse
all
me.
right?
Linda, take care of this guy. Straighten him out, will you? Linda. Mrs. Centracchio sitting over here, the better part of the
Yeah.
Centracchio clan. Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Good to be here, Bob.
Yes.
You're doing a great job. Thank you again.
Thank you. And folks, thank you for spending an hour with Bob.